times when we listen, and let me know if that's something that's happening for you or has ever happened to you. Someone is sharing a story or something that has happened with them or for them, and you're like, oh my God, this happened with me too, this exact thing, and then that happened, and you just completely started sharing your story. Has it ever happened to you? Have you been that person who just thought of something that they could absolutely relate about someone else, about something else that someone else was sharing, and interrupted the story? Or has it ever happened to you that you were sharing something and then someone else was like, oh my God, this happened to me, that exact same thing, and you were like, no, you didn't. No, I just wanted to share what happened to me, you don't understand. Welcome everyone to LifewithLiza podcast. Our mission at LifewithLiza is to share people's stories and the challenges that they have overcome, so that those who are listening in can get the strength, the courage, and the hope to be their better selves. And today we have a special edition episode. Welcome to the special edition episode. I'm so happy and grateful to have you here. And honestly, I still feel so flattered up to this day that you're joining in, that you're listening to this podcast, and that you're actively investing your time and energy into becoming your better self. And at one point, maybe you're listening to this podcast and you're just getting new information or a new look on life. But then the more you start listening to this, the more your brain becomes familiar with those concepts or the information that I'm sharing with you here through this podcast. You'll really start rewiring your brain, and you'll notice that you start acting differently. Maybe you start acting in a more empowering way. Maybe you start pursuing even scarier challenges. Maybe you really start challenging yourself, or whatever it might be for you. Information is power, but only when we actually start acting upon that information. But the more and more we get exposed to a certain type of information, the more likely we are to take a certain action, which is quite interesting, because in the end, it's only the action that you take that matters. For example, if you really do believe that exercising is an amazing thing for your health and body and mind and spirit, but you don't exercise, but you just believe that it is a great one, and then there is another person who doesn't believe that exercise works but works out every day, the person who works out every day will have way better results because they actually do take that action. But of course, this is just an extreme example, because it's hard to imagine someone who is working out every day who doesn't believe in the benefits of exercising or doesn't have that information. And we can say that definitely the information that you have influences the paradigm through which you view your life, and that influences what kind of actions you take. So you're more likely to take a certain action once you have a certain information. So I'm so happy to have you here, where you're getting exposed to all these other ideas and self-development tips. And something that I wanted to talk to you today is this great communication tip. And it's something that's I learned from the book of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I've read that book twice. I believe that it's one of the greatest self-development books ever written. I've read it the first time a few years back, and I've reread it a few weeks ago. And it was crazy for me to notice how that book has already influenced my life up to this point. Subconsciously, I was not consciously applying all that knowledge. But I've reread it now, and I started applying it even more and trying to be more intentional and to do it with more awareness, to constantly practice some of those 7 habits. And one of the habits that I wanted to talk to you about, and which is related to that communication tip that I wanted to share with you today, it is the habit which is called listen first to understand, and then to be understood. And I think this is such a powerful tip, and because it is that simple, it is that misunderstood or that not utilized, because it's almost too simple to work, but hard to implement. So what does it mean? Listen first to understand and then to be understood. So many times when we listen, and let me know if that's something that's happening for you or has ever happened to you, someone is sharing a story or something that has happened with them or for them, and you're like, oh my God, this happened with me too, this exact thing, and then that happened, and you just completely started sharing your story. Has it ever happened to you? Have you been that person who just thought of something that they could absolutely relate about someone else, about something else that someone else was sharing, and interrupted the story? Or has it ever happened to you that you were sharing something and then someone else was like, oh my God, this happened to me, that exact same thing, and you were like, no, you didn't. No, I just wanted to share what happened to me, you don't understand. Has it ever happened to you? So I think it's way easier to understand this habit once you start recollecting those memories, when someone interrupted you and they're like, oh my God, this happened to me. And at that moment, you really feel not understood and you almost feel reluctant to actually continue sharing your story, because you are in this actually vulnerable state of sharing something that's very relevant to you. And when someone starts putting their autobiography onto your story, it kind of creates a bit of a distance. You don't feel like you're being understood. And it's so interesting to see how much of the communication is just at times people exchanging words without truly communicating. You're not connecting to the deeper level. You're not truly listening to what the other person is saying. Just because you listen with the intention to say something next, you're already, once the other person is talking, you're already thinking what you will say next, instead of listening with the intention to truly understand that person, to ask them as many questions about their story, to be patiently listen, to make sure that you truly understand, and also to speak it back to them, to truly verify whether you're understanding what they have shared. And so many times it could be that we completely misunderstood some point and we didn't even realize it. And when people feel understood, it's the moment when the door to their heart opens up and you can build this connection with them, which is so much deeper, where trust is formed, where loyalty is formed, where all of these beautiful fundamentals of the relationships manifest. It's once you truly listen to someone, they feel understood, and then you can connect with them. So it is one of the ways to actually make someone feel understood, and I already just mentioned it earlier, and it's one of the biggest tips I've ever got regarding communication, is to reflect back to them what they have said, and to reflect back the emotion and reflect back a bit in your own words the context of the situation. Just mentioning, it does sound like you're really frustrated with the thing happening at work, and then the person will open up even more because they feel like they're understood, or they can correct you and they can say, no, I actually feel very angry about the thing that's happening at work. And then they still are even open up even more, and also you get a better understanding of what they're going through because you reflected back what they've said to you, you've reflected it back to them, and maybe the way you interpreted their words or their story is as if they sound like they're frustrated, but maybe the truth is that actually they're angry, but the way they're expressing it is not the same. The way they're expressing anger is not the same way you would have expressed it, and it sounded more like frustration, so that's why you would have made that subconscious assumption. And by reflecting it back to them, you can truly understand their perspective, and they will feel so understood, and it is so beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful gifts that you can give to someone, is for them to feel understood. To feel understood is almost equal to feel loved, because you've been understood on the fundamental human level. And I hope with this video we will be able to give that gift of feeling loved, feeling understood to more and more people, and you'll start practicing empathetic listening, reflecting it back to the person, reflecting back their feelings and what they've shared back to them, to make sure that you understand them, and to speak to listen with the intention to understand and not to be understood. And I hope more and more beautiful connections will be formed, more and more friendships, and more misunderstandings will be actually avoided. I hope you did enjoy this episode, and if you did, please be sure to subscribe to this channel, to like this video, share it with a friend or someone you care about deeply who would benefit from this topic of communication and listening to understand and not to be understood. And I see you in the next episode.